Listening, 1, 2. Listening, 1, 2. Listening, 1, 2. 1, 2.
All the others, and to Boy, who's here today, and Janet, and Myrtle, and Corin, and all the others, we at PRAESA feel your loss. Everyone knows, actually, that Neville treated each and every one that he came into contact with respect. The little things counted just as much as the big regarding valuing human beings. Neville always greeted everyone. I walked around this campus for so many years with Neville, and he stopped to greet everyone, and everyone knew him. He never ever would miss, even if he was feeling down or angry or upset, he would still greet everyone with a smile, and he knew how to include us all and make us all feel special. That was the really, really warm and wonderful thing about Neville. His deeds showed that he thought of PRAESA as a family. He stayed with PRAESA much too long. He was leaving all the time. He was going to leave for a long time, but he didn't. PRAESA was immensely important to him. Over the years, he inspired so many people to work beyond the call of duty for multilingualism, for language, for children, for education. I'm just talking about the PRAESA things now. We will carry on to do this in his memory. PRAESA's work on multilingualism, language policy and implementation, and literacy has actually quite quietly influenced and in some respects led educational understandings about language, particularly about mother tongue-based bilingual education, which by the way is an international term now, which Neville introduced at some point. Across South Africa and Africa, we have had messages from groups and individuals across the country and across the world who are feeling our pain at the loss of Neville today. I must mention Neville's brothers, or as he fondly called them, his grand frères, in Akalan, which is the AU language body, Adama Samaseku, Suzinia Matien, Sami Chumba, Maurice Tadiche, Alma Tenje, there are many others, and they are all shocked and bereft that Neville is no longer with us, because he was really a force behind the enormously complex but really necessary struggle for democracy through the intellectualization and the development of African languages. He was a tower of strength, insight, and guidance for us all. So PRAESA will continue its work, especially that of helping conditions to develop which get children wanting to read. And I'm so glad that Neville's little great-grand nephews are here with us today, because they know how much Neville loved reading stories with them, with Geordie and Jadie and others. Neville put his heart behind the initiation and support of community reading clubs, along with PRAESA colleagues who sang, and other colleagues and volunteers who sang for you here this morning. This was his passion in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Many people know that Neville always said, if you aren't carrying out a plan, your own plan, you're carrying out someone else's. And I just want to say for us at PRAESA here, that PRAESA will continue to carry out the plan that helps to transform children's experiences of reading and writing into satisfying ones and meaningful ones, so that Neville knew were so essential for growing well-educated, compassionate and critical citizens in South Africa.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends, Carol, PRAESA members, and especially family members of Neville who are with us today. The University of Cape Town has had a long association with Neville, and so it's fitting that we should be part of that memorial and memorializing him. And I hope that in the course of time we will find ways of memorializing him in a more permanent way, and we will look for ways to doing that. He first came to the University of Cape Town in the mid-50s, 1956, as a student. He did his undergraduate degrees, honours and masters here. He met one of our lecturers, Carl Tober, who created his interest in, stimulated this interest in German language, German studies and history, and of course then went on to complete a PhD and retained that lifelong connection both with Germany, with the discipline, the fields, and with the University of Cape Town. Others are going to talk in more detail about other parts of his biography and his history. But when he came back to the University of Cape Town, in a way, he reconnected, particularly when he joined Sept, when he set up and was a founder member of Sept in 1981 at Kanya College, because that, in some ways, was the precursor to many of our academic development programs. We were taking in students who had a came from disadvantaged school background, and the faith and confidence of a community of people who believed that with an intensive set of programs we could help get many of them into university and change access for individuals and change the future leadership of the country and academia by ensuring that there were cohorts of students coming through from disadvantaged backgrounds who would be able to get a tertiary education, and UCT was a partner and a key beneficiary not only of the students who came through Sept and Kanya College, but also of the staff. People like Erica Gillard and Ingrid Fisk, who were parts of Sept and who, in a sense, graduated into being part of our academic development programs of CHED and who played key roles in the university subsequently. As, of course, did Neville, who then made this his home for his work on literacy, on multilingualism, for PRAESA, and who used this, I hope, as a platform, an effective platform to push those issues, not just as an NGO might do so, but always with a very strong commitment to research, to understanding how we learn, to finding evidence that would show what was a better or worse way of educating students. He was enormously loyal, and perhaps the word that comes to mind for me when I think of him and of his values and his integrity is that he was pure, perhaps sometimes pure to a fault, committed to a value system and an ideology which was not very tolerant of ambiguity and complexity. It was because it was so committed. Commitment to non-racialism, a commitment to socialism and Marxism. I'm told that when PRAESA was founded and for many years, that commitment to socialism and egalitarianism translated, for example, into a policy that all staff members in PRAESA, regardless of their rank and seniority, would earn the same, because salary was not a reward for merit or achievement. Salary was something you needed to have in order to live on, and that those needs did not vary according to your stature and status. It was a purity and a commitment which he brought into his politics and his writing, And as you know, well, it came into his debates and his participation in UCT policy. At a more personal level, my own memories as far back as I can recall having any political consciousness as a senior student in school, Neville Alexander's name was known across the country. We didn't at that stage, I didn't at that stage understand what it stood for. He was just a struggle icon, someone who was on the island, someone who had taken up a revolutionary struggle. As I matured and went into university and became more familiar with what he represented, it was in part the window into Western Cape politics, which I can tell you for people from Gauteng is enormously complicated. We could never really understand it, and we still don't, even when we've lived here for several years. But somehow Neville represented the complexity of Western Cape politics, and we could get a window into those politics through his writings and through the debates around him, and they were fascinating. When I became a junior academic, I became aware of his role in Kenya and Sept because I was involved in recruiting students into medicine, into other programs, and many of these students were the graduates of Kenya College. And the practical impact, not just as a politician, not just as an ideas person, but as a person who was changing the lives of hundreds and possibly thousands of youngsters across the country, Cape and Gauteng, was obvious. And then as I became involved in UCT, we have had a close and interesting and sparring relationship around admissions policy, but he was always an insider, never an outsider, always loyal to the organization, to the point that he volunteered to be part of the Admissions Commission, which is chaired by Craig Howie, which unfortunately has not completed his work. I'm not sure Crane is also on the commission. I'm not sure Crane will say anything about it. But he wanted to help us shape our policy from the inside, and as someone who was committed to helping the institution get that policy right. And we are hugely indebted to him for that commitment. And of course, he is a national icon as an academic, and the university derives huge kudos from having academics like him, people who fulfill that goal that we have, not just to advance knowledge, not just to transmit that knowledge to the next generation, both of which he did so well, not just to be part of a socially responsive community that is responding to the needs of the broader society, which he did in all of his many intramural and extramural activities, but as an activist. The University of Cape Town would like to see itself as an activist university, would like to see its academics as organic intellectuals, as public intellectuals who are changing the world through their thoughts as thought leaders. And if anyone represents that, it was Neville Alexander. And we will miss him hugely, but his legacy will be with us for a very long time, and we can take some comfort and some joy in celebrating what he achieved in his life through the legacy that he leaves us.
Thank you. I do need to apologize. I was meant to introduce Max Price, our VC, and I just didn't. So you all know this is Max Price. And also, as I am just here, I also did mean to say that I know some people know I'm now the director of PRAESA, but I also wanted to say that there is a very thriving little group at PRAESA who are all here: Ntombi, Koli, Nadima, Venetia, Nish is still here, Malusi, and others who all may say something a bit later. And now we're going to have Craig.
Thank you to Carol for asking me to say a few words here this afternoon. First of all, my condolences to Neville's family, his comrades and friends, and to all of his colleagues over his long association with the politics of Cape Town sitting here this morning. There are folks sitting here in the room we've known Neville and been working with Neville for an extremely long time. It's really wonderful to have you here with us this afternoon. I'm going to talk quite narrowly. I talk specifically here to the question of what I call Neville's significance for those of us who work in the academy, in the university. So it's to the university that I am making these remarks. We'll have opportunity on other occasions to talk about the broader significance of Neville, but it's this framework around which Neville presented himself as a scholar, to which I wish to make my remarks here. I've long believed that Neville represented the best qualities one would wish to see in a scholar. One saw in him, in the way in which he conducted himself, those things which one would like to think embody the ideal of what it means to be learned or educated. His learnedness, cultivated in his home, in his school and university experience, and critically in the political movement, was about coming to a deep sense of self-awareness, responsibility, awareness of himself in history, about his relationship with people, about his place in this context in which we find ourselves. His educatedness was, if you like, a wide awakeness to the world. It made him acutely sensitive to injustice of any kind. It made him immeasurably compassionate and kind. His instincts were educated. Of course, he wasn't perfect, but for the most part, his education taught him that his own development was the result of the generosity of others. They had made it possible for him to become the important scholar that he was, one of the foremost intellectuals in the world on the question of race and racism. Without them, his life could have gone in another direction. And so he came to embody that same generosity of which he had been a recipient in his own life as a scholar. He treated everybody in the circumference of his everyday world with the same undifferentiated respect. He sought to recreate in all of his relationships that same sense of possibility that he had experienced in his own development. He was acutely aware of how he spoke to people. His discussions with people, anybody, always took place on the basis of respect, as if everybody, they and he himself, could always be learning to be better people. He knew how to listen. There was no conceit there. To be this kind of person, he had to be honest. He said what mattered to him. He could be searing in his analysis of an argument. He demanded of others the very best that was in them, but he was never unkind. Being like this, he evoked fierce loyalty and admiration. It also got him into trouble. He had the ability, however, when he did get into these difficult situations, never to forego the opportunity of learning. An extraordinary episode in his life, and probably one that South African history will continue to struggle with, arises around the death of Steve Biko. Steve Biko had come to Cape Town specifically to speak with Neville about establishing a united front of organizations in exile. Neville himself said, and I'm quoting him here, "He stood 2 meters away from my back door, and I refused to meet him, as much as I would have liked to have done so." The story goes that Biko waited for 3 hours outside of Neville's house. Steve, as is now well known, was arrested while driving back to King Williamstown and was killed by the security police. Neville had to explain that. And his explanation goes as such, and I'm quoting him now. "Our group had decided that I should not meet Biko at that time. And I've always taken, so listen to this, and I've always taken such disciplined decisions as binding. When I look back, I realise that this is perhaps the folly of being too principled. I was so hard. I was so principled. I had not been mandated to sing and could not get a mandate in time. I have always been a disciplined person, ever since I was a child. At times, perhaps too much. Close quotes. Now, key about the story is the kind of person he had become through his education. It had allowed him to give up any idea of self-importance. He was who he was because of others. This nurtured in him a capacity for self-reflection that was almost unlimited, to be self-critical, to ask how a situation could have been made better. It is this extraordinary quality that made his work in all its dimensions so utterly compelling. He embodied what it meant to be learned. We in the university community are deeply the poorer with him now gone. Thank you.
One of Neville's very beloved songs, a song that he really loved the words of, was Imagine by John Lennon, and Chloe Kylie, who's my daughter, is going to sing it for us. But she hasn't been able to do a sound check, so we're hoping it'll work.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one.
Francis Wilson.
He was indeed a dreamer, and he was not the only one. Thank you, PRAESA. Alexander family. friends, colleagues, comrades. It's not for me now to recount his life story or even to assess his work. Let me rather speak briefly about Neville Alexander as the human being, the dear friend whom Lindy, who's sitting up there, and I knew and worked with. He succeeded Lindy as director of SAC at Cape Town, and we worked with him for 38 years and knew him and loved him. He spent 10 years on Robben Island. He was banned for 5 years. These are experiences not lightly tossed aside. Prison can break men, it can destroy them. Banning, which turns people into social lepers, can completely undermine their confidence. I've seen it happen. Robben Island in the 1960s was not an easy place to be incarcerated to do hard labor. Stories of the lime quarry are legion. There is the famous photograph of Nelson Mandela with his spade. There were limited visits and communication with the outside world, very cruelly handled by the guards. There are many books about just how tough it was, but it was also a place which the prisoners sought to transform. How to educate their fellow prisoners and, on occasion, warders as well. They established the University of Robben Island with lectures in the quarry on law, history, politics, anthropology, whatever one of the prisoners knew. Neville Alexander, with his fellow UCT alum, Fikile Bam, later Judge President of the Land Claims Court, was at the heart of this process, along with many of the even better known political prisoners, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, all intellectuals. I wrote yesterday about the extraordinary impact that Robben Island had on these remarkable men who emerged after 10, 15, 20 years and more of incarceration. They all came out both harder and softer. Mandela, Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Alexander, Fikile Bam, and from an isolated spot on the island, Robert Sobukwe. They were harder, tougher in the sense of being more determined, more committed to ending an evil system, no matter how long it took, no matter how much it cost. They were tough and they remained tough. But they were also softer, gentler in the sense of learning how to listen, listening carefully and courteously to other points of view before asking penetrating and thought-provoking questions. Softer in the sense of learning to dig deeper into themselves, to know themselves better, as Crane has been explaining. That deep self-awareness, a capacity for self-reflection. This was very true of Neville. Listen to this uncompromising revolutionary talking about the effect on himself and on his fellow prisoners when they heard once only in 10 years, the voice of a child. This is what Neville said. I discovered things about myself which were certainly quite astounding, to say the least. I think the thing I missed most was children, not women, despite having had quite a reputation outside. No comment. But children. And I remember the first time all of us heard children in the quarry. It was as though we had suddenly been struck by lightning. We all stood dead still, and everyone was waiting for the moment when we would glimpse that child. Of course it wasn't allowed. The warders quickly made sure that we didn't actually see the kids, but that reminded me, just a lone voice, those lone voices, that one single occasion, that one occasion in 10 years, that I actually heard the voice of a child. It was really an astounding thing. Banning was also a challenge for many people. Not allowed ever to be with more than one other person, nor to work in any educational institution, nor to address any meeting, nor to publish anything, to be confined within a particular magisterial area, turned essentially into a social leper and into one's own jailer. A cruel punishment at the whim of the minister, and to which there was no court of appeal. Some people went into exile, Many went back into a quiet, non-political life. But there were also a significant number who were not in any way phased, who used the restrictions as a kind of guideline, but not under any circumstances to prevent them working and living as they needed to do. Neville was one of these. He used to visit us in our home, heavily disguised, he thought, in a frightful woolen cap pulled over his eyes, flashing his unmistakable smile and laughing uproariously, for he had a tremendous sense of humour. The special branch would certainly have known where he was, but decided it was not worth prosecuting him for this, though some were harassed in other ways. For example, Fikilebaum staying with us down here in Rondebosch, out for a run one morning, after he'd been on the island, out for a run one morning, didn't come back when expected, until we got a phone call from him. He was permitted one call, as he sat in the police station, picked up for being a bondsoup in the wrong place at the wrong time, evidently doing suspicious things. After banning, there was writing, there was Sept, there was PRAESA, there was the politics of socialism, and this is very important because Neville was not amongst those who thought that the socialist dream, would remain buried forever under the rubble of the Berlin Wall. He still dreamt. There's a story of him reading to children, right up now, recently. He took children so seriously, like Nelson Mandela did. And he said, these reading clubs, which Price has been very involved with, are fundamental, and I will read to children. And so this great man would go off to London on Saturday morning after Saturday morning, just to read to kids in the reading clubs. So anybody who says they can't do anything in South Africa, look at Neville Alexander. It's appropriate that one memorial meeting at least should be in a university, for at a profound level, Neville Alexander was primarily a teacher in everything that he did. And so we gather today to comfort each other and to say farewell to a great man, one of the prophets of our time, but also a most lovable human being, loving, fearless, humble. For all of us who knew him, his friendship was one of the great blessings of our lives. We say farewell, dear Neville. You surely lived a good life, straight, courageous, humble, and filled with love, with barmhartigheid, for all human beings, especially for those having to struggle with poverty and with being at the bottom of a harsh political economy.
Thank you very much, all of you, for those words. Thank you. I think what we wanted to do now was invite others who would like to say something to come and do so, or to stand up where you are and say something. We have a microphone.
I just want to share a vignette, one little story. I must have been either at junior secondary school when Neville Alexander came to our township in Ginsberg, in King Williamstown, in the Eastern Cape. In those days, there were winter schools that used to be run during the winter holidays for primary and secondary school children. And we were at this winter school, and we were told to come out and form a circle under a tree. And so we didn't understand that, because in those days, teaching took place in the classroom. So we were called out, so we went out, formed the circle, and there came this man, and while he was about to teach us South African history. And for the first time in my life, I heard these stories about the koi and the star. And we had never heard of this in our Bantu education history classes. As I say, that must have been 1979 or 1980 or thereabout. In that winter school, Neville taught me history. Francis Wilson was there, and many other people were in that winter school. And it really had a lifelong impact on my life. That's one incident that has always remained with me about Neville. I've known him in many, many other ways, but that incident has stayed with me. And so when I heard that he was teaching and still reading to children in Langa Township, I couldn't imagine a greater form of, or example of a lifelong commitment. And I really shall remember Neville for that.
Stole the place of a young person who was about to say something. He deferred to me because he said age before beauty. I think is a fair comment. I knew Neville for many years. I suppose probably the year he came to the University of Cape Town, 1956. I was then a high school student here in Cape Town. And one of our first encounters was an attempt by a small group of us in our high school to organize a chapter of what was called the Cape Peninsula Students' Union. Interesting the way we had gone about it, because we were all in what was then called JC. I suppose it's called grade 10 these days, huh? No. Anyway, we had invited Neville to our school to speak to the students. Our high school principal, an extremely cautious man, who knew that Alexander was political, stood at the gate, leaned over the gate and said, "Mr. Alexander, you're not coming into my school." And he thought that had ended that, but we had other strings on our bow. So we had a meeting in a church hall later that same day in the evening. An amusing meeting because we were JC students, used to being mischievous in class and having fun, etc. Neville, in his usual fashion, highly intellectual, and to many of the audience, in class again. So, of course, you can well imagine the mischief rose to the top. And I remember someone turning off the lights at some point, and they were turning around and staring, and walking towards him, like so and so. And he grabbed him and said, "Listen, you have fun in class all day. Please don't bring it to the meeting." I think that said something about the man. Neville was political, and I've always known him purely as someone engaged in liberation politics. The academic side, which is being celebrated today, I know secondhand and third-hand from reading his work and hearing from others. So it's the political Neville that I am going to be talking about. The milieu in which he came into in Cape Town was highly politicized. And there was a strong political tradition, intellectual tradition of Marxism here in Cape Town, specifically influenced by Leon Trotsky. And he adhered to that particular trend of Marxism. When he left to go and study in Germany, I'm sure he considered himself a committed follower of Leon Trotsky. And it was, in a sense, inevitable that in Europe he linked up with what was then known as the International Secretariat of the Fourth International, which had interesting repercussions for him personally and for his politics. The International Secretariat of the Fourth International was led by a man who used the party name of Pablo. But he actually was not Spanish. He was a Greek by the name of Baptiste. Yeah. He was actually a Greek by the name of Baptiste, who had established strong links with the Algerian National Liberation Front. And through that came to influence Neville as well. So when Neville returned home, one of the things which he did do, which led to the experiences that have been recounted here by Professor Wilson and others, was he founded a similar group in Cape Town called the National Liberation Front. And we all know it led to his incarceration, 10 years on the island, etc. As an intellectual of the left, I think Neville made quite a remarkable contribution to the theory of South African revolution. We have our differences, and we had our differences, I think, till the very end. And I remember an exchange on the Dennis Davis program on television, Judge for Yourself, where we moved along together until we reached a certain point, and then we came to the parting of the ways. And Dennis Davis remarked at that point, because I don't know why, what came across, because I had to defend Neville all along. Then I said, he said, Dr. Lanzak. I said, oh, when you have differences, you call him doctor. But anyway, that was the relationship we had. His passing is a loss to the South African intelligentsia. His passing is also a loss specifically to the liberation tradition in South African intellectual history. And he will be sorely missed.
I'm Matthias Bremsinger from the Linguistic Department. I joined the University of Cape Town in January, and I'm asked to pass on condolences to the family, to the colleagues and friends first from WOCAL, the World Congress of African Linguistics. I'm the secretary of this, and Neville is one of our standing committee members. So we met last week in Cameroon, and I was asked to pass on this. Second, I'm from Germany, so I'm from the University of Cologne, and the rector of the university this morning wrote a letter saying that I should pass on his condolences to the family and you. And so there was a long-standing relation between Neville and the University of Cologne. So 23 years ago I met him there, and since then we were in close contact. And it was also in Germany, in Cologne, where in July he found out about his cancer. And coming from the hospital, where he just received the news that he had cancer, he came to meet me, and he insisted that we worked even this day. So I think I stop.
I'm Raj Mistry from the linguistics section here at UCT, and I thought I should record our debt to Neville and our relations with him. I'll try to be brief, so I won't read too much from the text I'd originally planned. Our association with Neville went back to the 1980s, when I was invited to join the trust of the National Language Project, which he had founded as an NGO in Salt River. That was really exciting days, but also fearful days about finances for the NGO, the security police, and so on. Nevertheless, it generated two marvelous magazines, journals, the NLP Projects Review and the Glossier Boer, both very successful advocacy magazines for multilingualism, peace, and justice. And I could name a whole lot of people that we worked with. I think of them as a kind of first generation of language followers of Neville, and I see the second generation of PRAESarians sitting out here. And then the other major event was that I was involved in organizing the first huge conference here at UCT, the brainchild of Neville, Democratic Approaches to Language Planning and Standardization, with special reference to the harmonization of the Nguni and Sotho languages. These were topics close to Neville's heart, and he learned a lot from the conference and from subsequent vigorous debates amongst the communities. He also chaired the LangTag process, the language task group in the early 1990s, and he summarized a huge document meant to inform a new democratic government to be about language matters. Here too, he generated a sense of excitement and purpose. Here were academics and language practitioners coming together in an organic way for a common purpose that would feed into the nation's political life. The last phase, very quickly, was setting up PRAESA, the Project for Alternate Education, here at UCT. We shared the same floor in the Arts Building as neighbours and colleagues for many years. And Neville urged us in linguistics to put a new program in applied linguistics and African language studies on the books at UCT. And he set up parallel programs in the Cameroons and Ethiopia. This program is just starting to prosper, but will miss the special direction and impetus that only Neville could bring. We said at the UCT farewell last year, the tribute to Neville, that we would miss him, and we feel his loss even more now. May his soul rest in peace.
Professor Neville, would you like to say a few words?
Sorry, that was a long walk to freedom. And thank you for the opportunity to say a few words at this moment of sadness, but also a moment of joy, to celebrate the life of a remarkable individual. I cannot claim to have been very close to Neville, but we were close in some different, in a certain kind of way. I knew of him long before I met him. As this has been said, there was no way you could not know about Neville. From the Wasaso days, we knew about this revolutionary elder who was always available to talk to us. Much later, I met him, and when I met him, and this is very personal, I felt the way that most people feel when they have heard of me and they meet me, and they say, I was so disappointed. We thought you were a huge man, and so I was disappointed, but also happy in that here was this giant who was a little shorter than I. Neville was the next moment I had a very intimate moment with him was through the cellular. I was in Lesotho in exile, and one day in walks Linda Wilson, who was doing research on exiles, and later on we were to see the film that she did on. And what I remember about that film is a very poignant moment when I think it was Neville and Figile. There was a third person, I think it must have been, that's right, who were singing a song that they sang when they were in Roman Island. And the title of the film, if I remember well, was the Roman Island, the university, or something like that. It's a very moving time. But let me conclude these brief remarks. Max said that he used to have some sparring with Neville. I certainly had moments of sparring with him in the office in Bremner, but most time it is first when I consulted him on something when there was a difficult moment and I needed someone who had an angle, But there were many times when there was on the missions issue. So wherever Neville is going, I'll probably find him there, and we will continue debating about the admissions and when we are going to get rid of race. And so the complexities of running an institution, we always pitted against the certainties of conviction, and that it was always important to have that certainty of conviction, because you always measured yourself in your moments of weakness that there was something to aim for. And all of us aim for Neville's grandest vision, for all of us in South Africa, to be truly invisible in this, from the way we look, and be the people that we are. And that is Neville's dream. And among other things, he dreamed of mother tongue education, and I hope that wherever he is, we will reach his dream that the children be taught in the early years of their lives in the language of that they, as we say in my language, they sucked from their mother's breasts. We will remember this great man, and that in his departure we miss him, but in the way that we've always been with him, from knowing him, even before we met him, there was always a sense of community. We thank him, we thank his family, we thank Karen for having been there next to him most of his life, and we are privileged and stronger for having met him and known of him. I was sitting with the Archbishop Tutu up there, who said when he was asked, can he say a few words, he said he was shy. But then he said I should convey his message, that this is a man that he truly respected, and I have done my duty.
I think that some of the Vulindlela people want to sing us out. So I'll just say thank you very much for all coming and being here, and thank you all for coming and being here with us. Thank you.
Home of the